Hi everyone, Raphael Harry here, and you're listening to White Label American, a podcast where we hear stories from an immigrant or two, sometimes more. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of White Label American. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Danielle, Elena, Jeff, Mark, Martha, Sarah, Verena, Brenda, and Jennifer. Thank you for being patrons, making this podcast possible, and building a community. For our first time listeners, along with regulars who at this moment may not be able to sign up on Patreon, we understand you can still support this podcast via subscribing, sharing, giving 5 stars, and a positive review wherever you listen to podcasts on. So now let's jump to today's guest. I am honored to have someone who I was blessed to be introduced to. But today's guest is a strategic planner, a brand strategist, a savvy public administrator, and a black woman with magic. I'm adding that there. A black woman with magic, amongst many other fantastic attributes that she has going over on the local, national, and international level for over 20 years. And she's been involved in a couple of cities with on the political scenes in Philadelphia, New York, and around the country. So while I haven't done enough justice with the intro, I'll let her introduce herself properly, and y'all will get to meet this superstar that I have on today's podcast. So without much further ado, welcome to the show, Desiree Peterkin Bell. Did I get it right or did I go?
Yes, you
Well,
did.
okay.
You did. No, you good. You took your time and you got it right. I thank you for that.
Oh, appreciate that. Appreciate that. So thank you for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm blessed. I'm very blessed to be doing the work that I do and happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. And the honor is all ours that you joined us today. So let's begin. So you know, right from the beginning, where were you born, and can you introduce us to
Yeah.
your childhood?
Yeah. So I was raised by a single mother. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, in Brookdale Hospital. I'd like to say that I'm a true New York gypsy. I've lived in every single borough, yes, including Staten Island,
Oh wow.
New York
Oh, we'll count
City.
Staten Island today.
But I am Brooklyn through and through, for better or worse. And I'm from the part of Brooklyn, I call it the old Brooklyn, not the new Brooklyn.
Mm,
So where community was extremely important, where we may not have had much, but what we had was the love of each other, of our people, and the fight for continued purpose. And so at a very early age, and my mother instilled in me the power of education. I come from a family of Black women warriors, I like to say. My great grandmother was one of the first Black women to purchase her house with cash in Brooklyn, New York, on her street,
wow.
property we still own today. My grandmother used to tell me to speak truth to power, even if it made their ears bleed.
Mm,
And so I grew up really always questioning and not just accepting things that I heard, read, or saw. And my mother was a community advocate and activist. And when she was younger, she was one of the first Black students to integrate a school in Brooklyn, New York. And every single day she was chased home from school until one day she got sick and tired of running from crazy, to be frank, white boys who were so interested in showing her that she did not belong. My mother stopped running one day, turned around and faced them, and she said, I deserve to get a quality education, and I am here on purpose. And so that became my mantra for my life, which is everything I do is valued at purpose, not position.
mm,
So, regardless of your position in life,
yeah.
I truly believe that we have a purpose as a people, specifically as Black women in this country. And as someone who looks every single day to make a better world for their daughter. Those are the things that drive me, and have driven me for over 25 years.
Wow.
So I am a political advocate. I am an award-winning political strategist, brand builder, and marketer, and crisis communications expert. I've been in my field for about 25 years. I like to say that I am young at heart.
You are young.
Age is just a number,
It is.
and experience is everything.
It
And
is.
so I have worked with some amazing people in my life, everyone from President Barack Obama to some amazing other politicians like Mike Bloomberg after 9/11, helping to deliver New York City back as the epicenter of the world after those terror attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Working with Cory Booker, who's now senator, and I helped define his entire social media strategy by putting him on Twitter. And worked for some other amazing, great folks. And I've also worked for some not so great folks.
All right.
Uh,
We'll come to
but
that. We'll
comes
come
to
to that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's still stick to your childhood. So
So yeah. So
I
for
love
me,
that the word purpose kept coming up,
yes, purpose,
and
not.
yeah, and that's because I was actually I listened to Michelle Obama's podcast on my way to the studio today, and where she had her mom and her brother talking about her upbringing, and there's a lot of similarities, in the way you talk about how your family instilled in you purpose, and it wasn't just like a blind purpose, but it was a purpose with light. If I put it that way, there was a light to the purpose that was instilled in you, where in the face of adversity, you were still you still could look to the light and say yes,
Yes,
there's an aim, there's something to aim for,
yes.
so I really love that, and I love these are stories that I didn't get growing up, for myself, and was more about people who didn't look like us,
Hmm.
so that's why it's in my adult years that I'm now, connecting to stories like this, and I'm seeing how I missed out on a whole lot of things. So it's another beauty of why I'm doing this podcast, because I can show all this to my daughter and say, you don't have to, yes, everybody exists in the world, but for when you look at people like your dad's skin color, you don't have to say, oh, we don't achieve, we don't know how to go after our purpose.
Yes.
It's only one group that knows how to do it. No, so that's one reason why I had to bring you on the podcast too. So
I-
with that being said, I have to ask this question: what do you
Yes.
consider your most favorite, or let me just say your favorite childhood memory? What would you consider your favorite childhood memory?
I have a few. I think my favorite childhood memory is with my mother. There was a time period where we lived in the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, to be exact, and there was this beautiful notion that we may not have known what the next day brought. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't grow up wealthy. My mother made ends meet in a way that I'm still fascinated by today. But what she always had was love in her heart for us. And she never, ever, ever told us that there were any limits to anything that we can do. And I can remember we were on the beach in St. Thomas, and my mother looking out at the water and looking back at me, telling me, just remember you can do anything, and no one can stop you.
Hmm.
And I remember really internalizing that. You know, my mother wasn't, she knew the obstacles that existed for a young Black child and as a
Yeah.
Black woman herself. But what she refused to accept is that those obstacles could define our path.
Hmm.
Um, what she imparted in me, and along with my sisters, I'm the oldest of three girls, is that we had so much power in who we were to be, that it overshadows some of the challenges that she knew we would come across. And if we were true in ourselves and driven by purpose and
Yeah.
not position, we could accomplish anything. So that would be my favorite memory as a child, which was the knowledge that she imparted on me, that there are no limits to what I can do.
Wow. So that's my favorite question I always ask is the childhood memory, because
Mhm.
there's always a thread that connects from the answer given to whatever the guest is doing in the present day.
Mhm.
So that's why I just love the answers I always receive from that question. So how long were you out there on the Virgin Islands?
We lived there for about a year and a half. And then we came back to the States. My grandfather had gotten sick, and so we had to come back
Oh,
to the stateside and be with him. But we went out there because I still have family there,
okay.
and our family's kind of spread everywhere.
Yeah.
We are an eclectic group of Black family. For a Black family, we have everything in our family. I got Chinese Jamaican cousins. We
That's
have,
beautiful.
yeah, when you come to my house for Thanksgiving, although not in the midst of COVID, but prior
Obviously.
to, you would hear, Jamaican music in the background, with some Spanish speaking aunts in the corner, but all part of the Black diaspora, right? And
Yes.
so that's something that really combines all of us together. It's the fabric of what brings us together because it defines who we are.
That's beautiful. So I've never been that way to the Virgin Islands. So I only know that that it's an island, obviously, and so there's a beach, and
It's
and
part of the
yeah,
US too. That's
yeah.
the
So
good
it
thing.
took me a while to even figure that out, that it's part of the U.S. Because I think there's also a British Virgin Islands.
There is,
So
yeah.
I
So
think
that
that's what I was familiar with at first. Then I
okay.
found out that there was the U.S. Virgin Islands too, and I was like, oh wow, okay, so there's two. And then they're like, oh yeah, you're also a citizen if you from the U.S. Virgin Islands. I was like, oh wow, that
Yeah.
is mind blowing too. So and then I
Oh,
found out that a lot of black people are out there. So
a ton. I mean, they
yeah.
own the island.
So it was like, wait, extra surprise there.
Yeah.
So, for someone who's not familiar with Virgin Islands, how would you describe it to those who
Um,
aren't?
well, I mean, I think it's changed quite a bit. I have not been there in some years, but the Virgin Islands to me was, a place of peace, but also a place of great complexity too, right? I mean, I think, just like any other Caribbean country, you see lots of highs and you see lots of lows in terms
Hmm.
of people who have and people who don't. But I always say that the difference between seeing those lows, or those folks who don't have, in a place like Brooklyn or versus a place like Virgin Islands, is the place in Virgin Islands, you still got blue water, still
Mm,
pretty.
yep.
So, it's different when you wake up, right? And you look outside and you're like, huh, I may not have X, Y, and Z, but my environment is filling me with this peace and calm
Yeah.
and happiness. And so I think, that's one of my greatest memories of the Virgin Islands. And so what I tell folks is, just like when I make my world travels as well, the have and the have nots are different,
Yep.
and it really depends on the context in which people exist.
Mm, all righty. So, moving forward, um, when did you begin to identify with with the purpose of the path that you now see yourself on?
I, so for me, and I tell young people this all the time, I do a lot of speeches, and I talk to lots of young people who often find themselves in the midst of making some major life decisions. And so for me, I had a quarter life crisis, which really does exist.
Hmm.
Um, so I was the first person in my family to graduate college, to go to grad school. I had gotten accepted to law school. And so I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and spent almost a year working at one of the biggest law firms in the world, in the country, in New York City in Times Square. And I was working on a U.S. tobacco case, and I was working on another case that was very well known at the time, Christie's and Sotheby's price fixing case. Essentially, rich people stealing from other rich people, which I
Mm-hmm.
just did not get because I didn't come up with money. So I didn't understand that part. But whatever. And I remember sitting across from a woman who had visible effects of smoking. And she was a woman who was a Black woman.
Mm.
And I was on the other side of the table. And she was looking at me as if I didn't belong, or if I, like I was on the wrong team. And I felt like crap.
Mm.
And I went home that night, and I cried to my mother, and I told my mother, even though I'm making all this money and this is a great big law firm and all that great stuff,
Yeah.
that I just wasn't happy. I didn't feel like I was fulfilling my purpose. And she said to me, we do what makes you happy, and then everything else will fall into place. And so I walked out of the law firm, and I did what most people don't do, which is I went back and got a master's in public policy, and began my official journey into government. I wanted to understand this thing called government, and how it was supposed to communicate with its people, what its role and responsibility was to its constituents, how public policy can help to shape people's lives,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then how you can advocate from the inside, not only from the
From the
outside.
outside. Yeah.
And so that is essentially what helped to define my career, and that's what I'm doing right now. But now I'm on the outside, which is even more exciting.
Yeah, but you started from the inside, and so you have a taste of both worlds. So you provided a better perspective, in my
Yes,
opinion.
100.
Yeah. So I like I like that you are able to talk about the crisis that we called it the midlife crisis, and
Quarter life
quarter
crisis, quarter.
life. Sorry, quarter life crisis. I correct myself, and uh, yeah, I think that's one thing that I've been on telling people, like, we need to do better in being more open and in the language that we use, in especially like when we are talking to the younger ones, because the examples that I got growing up, it was always like, oh, this person went to school and then this is it. They just knew what they wanted to do and that's it. They found success. And you couldn't like doubt yourself. You couldn't ask questions. And the moment you start, wait, am I on the right path? Is there something going on? Then you're a failure. That's it. And
Yeah,
the word failure was just like, that's the end. There's no recovery. Totally throw you in the dump. But failure shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be something that is as negative as that. You can bounce back from it. You should be able to ask that question, like, wait, am I on the right path? Is this where I want to be? And the moment you start asking that question, because like when I was much younger, and I'd said I wanted to be an athlete. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have made it as an athlete, but that's as I just watched the Olympics for
don't
like
know
2 weeks. I just watched the Olympics for 2 weeks, but family got mad with me for saying that. And but the whole mentality for most of our families was, you either said you wanted to be a doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer,
that.
and I think the fifth one was petroleum engineer. Petroleum engineer. I forgot what the fifth one was, but there was, or either you joined the Nigerian army and went in for general, because generals
Yeah.
were ruled by generals. So something like that, and it wasn't like there was any other thing outside of that. So
Hmm.
when you said something that was outside of those big five,
Yeah.
either you got beat or they chewed you out. Like, what is wrong with
Right.
this kid?
Right.
Why can't you be like every other kid who wants to be in those, who's aiming for those fives? And like, wait, what about you? Are you doing one of those fives? And
Right.
how dare you ask me a question? Shut up. And then later on you start realize that, wait, the people who told you to aim for those fives, they never went for those fives.
Right.
But they'll try to force you, and then You started going for it, and then one day you woke up and like, no, I don't like. I just don't feel it. I'm not feeling it. I've been
Yep.
forcing myself, and I hate it. I just hate the life. And
Yep.
yes, this person is making so much money, but I'm comparing myself to somebody. And then later
Mm-hmm.
on, there are people who will hear that I refuse to follow that path intentionally,
Mm-hmm.
and they're on that path. They're making money, and then they will reach out to me like, "Hey, man, how did you do it?"
Right.
I said, "Do
How
what?"
did you get off the path and still make it?
They're
Right.
like, I'm like, I haven't even made it, but I've decided I'm pursuing my happiness first,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
what I'm on right now. They're like,
Most
wow,
important.
but I wish I could, because but I have the money now, but there's something I just feel restless, and I'm like, are you happy?
Mm.
Have you answered that question? Can you answer that question? You got you can't even answer the issue of you can't even find somebody you love because everything is just like it was a designed path you were given. It wasn't you.
Right.
You didn't even make your own path. Someone else said this is how it should work for you. So go. I mean, you just
Yeah.
jumped on that path, and then you ended up with the not the wrong. I would say the wrong person, and then it's like you started a family, and then now it's like, wait, I can't, and but the person doesn't know how to say I can't. Not like you hit the person, but you ended up with the wrong person, so everything
Right.
is
Because
just confusing now, and the hole keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and I'm like, just
well, because you're
stop.
driven by other people's, and that's the thing, I think. And so I'm a huge believer that, and I'm doing this even more now, which
Hmm.
is, with vulnerability comes strength. Okay.
Yeah,
And so part of that is, and I'll be honest with you, Black people along the diaspora, a lot of times historically, we have not been allowed to be vulnerable.
no,
And I can tell you from a Black woman standpoint, I have fell into these dangerous, dangerous tropes of strong Black woman. Okay. Historically, there have been issues with the idea that Black women are so strong we can bear all,
hmm,
um, put up with anything. But that's really a self-harming ideology, because what that's saying is that we're not allowed to be soft. We're not allowed to say we need help. We're not allowed to not have it figured out. We're not allowed to be vulnerable. And in all of those things is the power. The real power is in being open and honest and authentic. And so, I'm learning a lot more about that in my 40s, I'll be honest with you, than I did in my late teens and early 20s. I subscribe to those dangerous tropes of, strong Black woman, and I can figure out and I can fix this and do that.
yeah,
Now I'm just like, no, I can't fix it. I need help.
yeah, which is
And
which is
I share
good.
that with, yeah, a
Hmm.
lot of younger people too, because it's a dangerous stereotype to begin to live in, particularly for people who look like us, because that means that we are so focused on making sure that the world sees us a certain way
Yeah,
that we keep everything inside. And when you do that, that increases your chance of stress.
yeah,
We die more from stress than our white counterparts.
hmm,
We die from hypertension,
yeah,
from diabetes, all of those things. And that's because we're not able to, a lot of us aren't able to figure out how we can be both authentic and show up as our true selves, and vulnerable, at the same time. And so that's something that I'm pushing for. As a mother, I want my daughter to see me that way. As a wife, I want my husband to know that I'm his true partner, but I also need help too.
yeah.
And in the world, I show up as a Black woman in all my complexity and authenticity.
Oh yeah, man. That's something that I'm still working on recognizing and respecting when I see others, especially my Black brethren, call out for help and
Mhm.
show that vulnerable side. And some so oh, this is a weakness. I'm like, no, it's not a weakness. Don't use that language of it's a weakness because we've all been victims to that messaging of we have to show strength 24/7, and
Mhm.
you can't take a step back and reassess, and which is good for us to fix things. My uncle who was like the closest person who also my favorite uncle. He used to be my favorite uncle, and he was just beginning to things were just beginning to happen for him. I think it was like 45. if I'm not mistaken, around the age of 44, 45. And, the things were just happening for him. Everything was just booming. But he hardly took a break. He was, sometimes I would hang out with him. I would go to his house. We were living in Port Harcourt then, in Nigeria, and I'll go to his house like 6 a.m. I'm at his house. He was already awake before 5:30, running around doing some stuff. And we didn't have internet. We didn't have the internet, but he's always awake. Cell phone will ring and whatever. And then he's like, okay, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. Run to this place, jump in the car, run here, run there, run there, run there. And then he'll get home like midnight. I'm like, Uncle, when you take a break? And some days you will see him, it started showing on his face. And then one day he was like, you know what? I should just take my wife, someone will watch the kids and I'll just take my wife, we'll go somewhere. 2 weeks, 2 weeks. He was into politics also. His party chairman said, hey man, you work so hard for us. Take a break. It's like everybody was saying it. Take a break. Take a break. This kept coming up. He was like, yeah, but I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm doing this. I'm in charge. I'm in charge. I'm in charge. And then almost a month later, we heard he collapsed. He was in the hospital.
Oh,
But now the mindset that we have, because we don't recognize the language we had then, we refuse to see that stress could bring somebody down.
yeah.
So it's not recognized. Instead, someone already said, "Oh, witches must have attacked him. It's supernatural."
Oh,
That's where it was going. So I went to see him at the hospital, and the doctor was like, "Yeah, you need to rest and all that. Take medication." And he was already talking about, "Oh, I have meetings on Friday." I saw him on Monday. I saw him on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, he was already talking about meetings on Friday. And I was like, Uncle, you gotta rest,
yeah,
have rest. But he's
yeah.
like, yeah, but I'm good. The doctor said I'm good, right? Everything. And he's talking this, that, that. He had a court case that Tuesday and he couldn't go to, he was in the next state, in a city in the next state. So I had to go to the court and present a letter to the judge and say he couldn't come because he was also a lawyer. So I went there and represented him, just dropped the letter, and the judge adjourned the case. That was the last time I saw him. The
Oh,
Friday he
wow.
was supposed to be discharged. He died. That was the day
Oh,
he died.
wow.
But I don't think he really took a break while he was in the hospital. He was still
Yeah.
trying to walk, do things, and all that. And after his death, you know, I was grieving. I'd never been able to deal with death. I was angry. And was the first thing that my mind went to was somebody had used witchcraft to get him. Every other person
Interesting.
was saying that, and it would take
Yeah.
years before I'll finally admit the truth that this man never took a break. He never took a break. He never rested. He was just working, 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 and it took a toll. Because it builds
Yeah.
up. It builds up,
And
and
it sits on your shoulders
yeah.
and it creates unhealthy habits,
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy environments. And I think, like I said before, this is a wide issue along the diaspora, right? Around our people, because we have a history of working, 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 because we haven't had the luxuries historically of having vacations,
Yes.
or we haven't had the luxury of being able to be on a yacht for a month or 2 weeks and
Mm-hmm.
just to take in all the nice scenery. And so I think, from our standpoint, we have also passed these down from generation to generation. And it's partly true that for us to be as successful as our white counterparts, to be frank, that we have to work twice as hard and do twice as much.
Yeah.
And I think that was a lesson and a narrative that folks have tried to present from generation to generation, but it's also dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
It also sets us up completely. It sets up a dichotomy between us and our white counterparts, to say that they can get away with a lot of stuff and we won't be able to rest as much. We won't be able to relax. We have to work harder. We have to do more. We have to almost kill ourselves. And so I'm pushing back on that whole narrative and that whole history,
Yeah.
even in the work that I do, because here's a reality. And a reality is that this world will kill you.
It's true.
You are Black, this world will kill you. And I think we saw some of that, unfortunately, in the summer that happened last year, whether you were Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, or whether you were George Floyd,
Mm-hmm.
right? And If that is the world that we exist in right now, along with the injustices that are surrounding us, we have no choice, or we should have no choice but to protect our peace, our sanity, and our health. And we have to figure out how to do that among ourselves and among our people every single day.
True. Excellent. Yep. That's an advice that I will never argue against. Because since I came to the realization, I was like, yeah, I've been doing it wrong. And I quickly switched and I started advising the younger ones to see the light. And
Good.
hopefully
Good.
they see the light. So before I jump into the next question, which will focus more on your travels,
Yes.
and then jump into the politics. Yeah, we jump deeper into politics. I will take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Your host, Raphael Harry here. I can't believe we've gone past our 1 year anniversary of doing White Label American. I've had the privilege of speaking with some amazing people sharing their modern day immigrant stories. And you've allowed this Nigerian immigrant to share parts of his immigrant journey through this podcast. Also, one of my goals of this podcast is breaking down artificial walls that keep people from getting to understand each other. Based on your wonderful feedback over the last year, I think we have done a decent job in breaking down some of those walls. We would like to continue and expand on this mission, but we need your help. I've had an amazing time creating and producing episodes for this show largely on my own. We have a lot of ideas for new and exciting content to expand upon the mission, but we need direct support from you, our listeners, which is why we have created a White Label American Patreon page where you can make a one-time donation or become a sustaining contributor, where you can get access to exclusive content, help me interview upcoming guests by submitting questions, and even have the chance to sit down with me for a one-on-one conversation, either virtually or in studio. So if this podcast means something to you, and if you really love this show, think about becoming a sustaining contributor and donating by going to patreon.com/whitelabelamericanpod. Thanks for listening and for the privilege of your company. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. So, as someone who has traveled extensively around the country, internationally, what are some of the most memorable experiences that stand out to you and have affected the way you handle you go about your career?
There are two specific trips that stand out. Well, there's three. So let me I'll do it in a timeline order, which is the first time I went to Tel Aviv in Israel. I was completely taken aback by how beautiful it was, because of all of the pictures and the trauma that you see on TV about this country.
Mm-hmm.
And the fighting, right? The only thing I knew of Israel was that there were groups of people always fighting.
Yeah.
One for, acknowledgement, and the other for keeping what they have. And so, although I'm sure they'll both say something different, this is me as an observer. And so the first time I went to Tel Aviv, it was amazing. The beaches were beautiful. But I was there getting some work done. And I remember the folks that I was there with, they were taking me out on a night on the town. And later that evening, we had to travel with armed guards because it wasn't safe. And this was just kind of the norm for them. And I could not imagine having to live my life like that every single day. And then later on in the trip, I actually had meetings in Palestine. And I remember looking on the map, looking for it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find it. And my tour guide was telling me, of course you can't find it because the Israelis don't recognize it as a territory. So it wouldn't be on the map that you're looking at. And that completely confounded me because I was like, I am going to this place. I know it exists. I have meetings here. But there are literally people who won't even acknowledge that this whole group of people have settled here, live here.
Yep.
I was completely just kind of flabbergasted with the kinds of struggles that I know as a Black American in this country, but also but was made aware now of the struggles that other people have in other countries of simply just even wanting to be acknowledged for their existence. And it was so disheartening for me. And so that was one of the greatest realizations, that we are in this global society and we're interconnected in ways that we just don't know how. The more information we know about each other, the more knowledge we share, and then the more wiser we can be. My other interesting trip was I went to India and I had a big speaking engagement there. And I got to stay in this amazing hotel and it was so beautiful. And then I stepped outside into New Delhi and I was completely flabbergasted with the amount of poverty that I saw. And this is poverty, you know, I grew up in poverty in Brooklyn, New York. You know what I mean? Like, I know what poverty is, but poverty in India was something completely like,
it's a different level.
It's a different level. And I think, you know, again, this is why I love to travel and I have businesses, you know, abroad. I love to remind myself, regardless of how many struggles we have within the diaspora in this country as Black people, what I remind myself of is that this is still the greatest country in the world, despite and in light of the atrocities that still happen.
Yes.
Because the reality in other countries is that poverty is different, that inadequacy and injustice is completely different, you know, in other countries. And so, you know, I have this global perspective now where I understand the context in which I exist, how I can influence, and then how I get my knowledge to make my decisions. And then the third place story is, you know, there's a part of Pennsylvania that people call Pennsyltucky. And
wow.
Pennsyltucky, they call it Pennsyltucky because it is literally like the country.
Okay.
Literally. And so I remember working, this is when I was working on the campaign in 2012. I helped to lead Pennsylvania for President Barack Obama. We did it rather successfully. And I had an event out there in Western Pennsylvania and I was met with a noose. Wow. And I didn't know what it was. I literally didn't know. I was like, that looks like a weird rope. And then someone said, Desiree, that's a noose. And I was like, oh, they trying to hang me? like we're doing that in 2012? But it was a precursor, interestingly enough, right, to some of the angst and anger that some people had about the level of diversity that was happening around the country, and their idea of who was getting power and who was being left behind. And so for me, that was like, there's a realization that even in this country, there are areas like that. And you saw that, unfortunately, on January 6th, when many of those folks stormed the Capitol. And, you know, you saw that there are folks from areas throughout the United States who feel left behind. Now, whether it is justified or not, because I have my opinions about that.
Oh, I do.
Matter, right? But what they feel is they feel left out. They feel forgotten. They feel betrayed. And it's crazy to think that so many folks can feel that way, even if the facts don't line up. That way. And so for me, those would be three distinct trips, right? So Tel Aviv, India, and then, you know, the western part of Pennsylvania, which is called Pennsyltucky, in terms of understanding how my travels have helped to guide me and my work.
So your story, your experience in India, reminded me of when I was in the Navy, and I think it was one of my chiefs was talking about growing up in poverty. He was born here, and he was like, if you never had, uh, if anyone never had government cheese, they can't talk to him about growing up in poverty. And I was like, well, to be honest, I never had cheese in my life until I was about 25. Or
Wow.
I don't think we never had, our government don't give us cheese. Where I grew up, if government give you food, you lucky. You have to be highly connected for government to give you food. So, yeah, when you say that, because he was trying to claim the king of, he grew up he was like the king of poverty or something.
Poor and
And I was
hardship.
like, yeah, there are other people here who've seen some poverty that, I don't know. It's like they consider you rich, growing
Right,
up in wealth in comparison.
right.
And I was supposed to be. I started off in middle class, and then things changed, and then I dropped. So even in the middle class level, I never had running water in my life. For
Right.
Yeah, so it was only once that we had running water when we lived in this highbrow estate, and where I experienced racism without even knowing what racism was. So I never knew it
Mhm.
was racism I was going through. But after, much later, by the time my teenage years, into my young adult years, there was no running water. You calculated,
Wow.
when you ate food. I got to be homeless, but there was, so it's like hearing that there's welfare and all this stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm like, no government gives you that. Back home, you have to be either willing to die for that government. Like, oh, during election time, I'm gonna go snatch ballot boxes for you. I'll do some
Right.
crazy stuff for you. Don't worry, and then you get paid peanuts. And
Right.
then he's staring at me like, what? I said, yeah, man, I never ate cheese until if I had all my money I had, I was like, why would I go buy cheese? It was
Right.
too expensive. That was a luxury for me. So until I
Right.
moved to the United States, and it still affects me to this day, because you have to remind me, because I haven't implanted it in my brain that I can afford to buy cheese now. So if I go to
Right.
to
Now
buy
you
to the
can get
grocery
it.
store, I buy every other thing, and it's like I walk past cheese because it's still not in here, but it was only in my textbooks as a kid. Like, oh, cheese, people eat cheese. Okay, you just read it, but you're not planning to eat cheese. Never. Pizza. I think the first time I tried pizza was about 12, 13, and one of my wealthier, cousins had come back from London. She claimed she brought pizza with her. I don't know if she brought it from London or whatever. It was bad pizza she gave me. I tasted it. I was like, oh, this is terrible. It was bad.
Oh
That was
my
the
God.
first and the last time I tried pizza until I left Nigeria. I couldn't afford it. Now there's pizzas everywhere. It's much more
Right.
affordable. But during my time, it wasn't. It was a luxury. Even
Right.
chicken, goat
Right.
meat, you ate that on your birthday, Christmas Day, Easter Sunday.
Oh my God. Yep.
So,
That's it.
and I
But
was supposed.
that's why context is so important, right? Because we talk about each, and that's why there's so much within the diaspora, right? And you mentioned this before.
Mhm.
This is why we got to talk about our experiences too, because like I said, poor and poor in Brooklyn was real different than
Yeah.
poor, like, you know, running water wasn't a question. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Not getting the shoes that I wanted, you
Mhm.
know, not being able to afford that kind of stuff. But, it, your reality is defined by the context in which you exist.
Yeah.
And I think for many of us, we can forget that.
Mhm.
Um, so, I am often reminded when I travel abroad how grateful I am. But it also helps me to understand that I can perpetually criticize this country as well. I love this quote. Um, and this is a quote from James Baldwin, and he says, "I love America more than any other country in the world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually."
Oh yes. I
And so,
remember that quote.
yeah, so there is power to me in helping the systems in this country, the people in this country, to represent the ideals of democracy, the ideals of meritocracy, and the
Yep.
ideals of justice. because I don't know if there's another place greater than this in the world, but we haven't gotten it right in this country, which is why we continue to, or why I continue to engage in battles to fight and make sure that we get to those ideals as much as we possibly can.
And it's something, even when we get it right, it's not something that we should stop there. We still have to keep
Oh
making it
yeah.
better and better.
Yes.
It's a lifelong process until the day this world no longer exists.
You're
And
absolutely right. We should
that's
always be fighting
mhm.
and I say that we should always be uncomfortable, right? The
Yeah,
day that you are comfortable in anything in life, right? That means that you are complacent. That means
exactly.
that you no longer want to, put the energy and effort into making something even much more greater. And so I never want to be that complacent. I always want to feel hopeful about the more, the
Mm,
progress, and the continued push for what I think can be great, not just good.
exactly. Oh, quick point on news.
Yes.
Actually, the first time someone in boot camp, someone made the news during my basic training, and I didn't know, and I defended the person. It took me years. It took me a year later to realize, like, yeah, he was a racist. He's a racist because
Oh,
he befriended me. He was ironing my clothes and doing my polishing my shoes for me, and the other black guys were like, why are you cool with
really?
this racist? He made the news. I was like, are you sure? Are you sure it wasn't like a rope? He wasn't knots. He was tying. I, and I was thinking I was woke then, and
Oh,
yeah, man, yeah.
wow.
So later on, we ended up at the same duty station, but he was at a different command, and he kept getting into trouble. All the black, well, all our instructors in boot camp, they were black, and
Okay.
they didn't like him because they knew he was a racist, but he was well connected. He came from a
Okay.
wealthy family, so he didn't get kicked out in basic training. But my senior chief said to him, one of our senior chiefs said to him on our graduation day that I give you 3 months, you'll be kicked out of the Navy. He made it past 3 months, and then he got to his duty station, got into trouble first time, second time, and then the third time he was right outside the base. Normally he would have called me for something if he got in trouble, and then he got drunk. He didn't call me, and then drove into a shopping center.
What?
So, so I guess they just got tired of bailing him out and
Oh
sent
my
him.
gosh.
But they still try to save him. They sent him to an anger management class, and then he beat somebody up there. And then, all
Anger
right,
man
get out.
needed
Then
more than that. He
yeah,
needed more than that.
but it
That's
was it was obvious that not looking back as I was like, oh yeah, this guy's he's a racist. Like yeah,
oh
but
wow.
I was the guy who defended him in boot camp. Like oh no, I don't think that was a news, but it was a news. I'd never nobody had done that around me before, so it was my first time.
Yeah, I don't it's funny. I had
Yeah.
this question the other day. I don't think and this is all debatable in this country. For other countries, the things are different. But in this country, I do not believe that Black people can be racist because racism deals with power and structure.
Yes.
And so prejudice, sure.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, we could be prejudiced till the cows come home. But my personal opinion, and it's, like I said, supported by, research and study and data analytics and facts, is that racism deals with power and structure. And as such, Black people in this country we are not the power structure
No.
in this. And so, because we are not the power structure in this country, we do not own that, which means that we are not the predominant force, and therefore can't be racist as the folks who don't have that power.
Oh yeah.
And so, this is always a hard question to have with folks. And what's funny is I'm gonna turn the tables on you for a second. I got a question for you,
Sure. Go
which
ahead.
which is, I was having this conversation with a woman who's an African woman, and we used to have these conversations, and I could never understand why. And this has happened this summer. When the power and the push and the illumination of Black Lives Matter came out again, and I have to remind people, Black Lives Matter did not start this summer.
Of course.
Okay.
Yep.
Black Lives Matter as a movement began after Trayvon Martin was killed,
Yes.
and has since been a movement and an organization. And so this summer just illuminated globally the power of Black Lives Matter, and that message, that narrative, and its purpose. But there was a woman who I was trying to befriend, and she was an African woman who did not want to talk to me about race. And she said that Africans don't talk about race as much because it makes them uncomfortable. And I said, well, here's the difference. You know, when you're in the US and you pulled over by a cop or you have an encounter with a cop, the cop's not going to ask you, what tribe are you from?
Yeah.
Right? The cop is going to see that you're Black.
Yes.
Period. And because of that already implicit bias, may treat you significantly different than he would treat someone who didn't look like you and was, you know, your white counterpart. And so there has to be this kind of understanding within the diaspora that we are all connected. You don't have a luxury of not talking about the things that impact us all.
Mhm.
So question for you is, do you feel that there's a disconnect between folks who have literally come from Africa and African Americans here, and the understanding of the Black plight, or the fight for Black Lives Matter? Does that
Uh,
make sense?
yeah, yeah, it makes sense. There's it all boils down to the language that a whole
Mm,
lot of us were raised in and raised with. So, like this week of Martin Luther King's Jr.'s Day, in the
yep.
city where I grew up in, well, I spent a lot of my formative years in Benin City. It's a big holiday among some of the private schools. And I
Mm,
happened to attend one of the biggest ones there, Word of Faith College, owned by a popular late Archbishop who is quite popular with many of the evangelicals here because he used to bring them over there.
mhm,
And why was that a big deal for us? It was a day where if you could recite the I Have a Dream speech,
mhm.
and the person who recited it in Queen's English, the best, tended to win. You know, they pick a winner. The person who gave the best recitation of the speech, you get
Oh,
to you pick you as the winner. You got like a 1 year scholarship. It ended up
oh, wow.
being someone from the elites who ended up winning. Those of us at the bottom never won, unfortunately. But that's how the day became celebrated. I Have a
Okay.
Dream speech was all it got reduced to, and you never got to understand what Martin Luther King was about because all it just boiled down to, oh, he wants black and white people to just come together.
Right.
And as soon as he got assassinated, then everything worked out because the Civil Rights Act was signed.
Mhm.
So no more racism. That becomes
Oh,
the
that's
mentality
the
that a whole lot of
idea.
people adopt, and then you see white preachers coming down to this evangelical who has like a huge church. He's like one of the richest pastors, and he's not in Lagos, which is the mega city. He's in Benin City, which is a smaller city, but he's able to attract these big guys. So white people are coming here. So how's their racism? But these are white people who, when Barack Obama was president, these are the guys who were actively, openly saying racist things against him.
Right.
But
Right.
those people, you can't tell people in Nigeria that pastor was racist. No, that guy came to Nigeria and was praying for us, laying hands on black people. So how can he be racist in America? It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. In Uganda, the white evangelicals who've been going there to tell the president pass anti-gay laws, you can how are you going to? They're Christians. So how can we say those are bad people? You can't
Mhm.
because it doesn't add up to the messaging they've been receiving. 700 Club used to be on our state and national TV daily.
Hmm.
What's his name? The guy on seven, Pat, is it Pat Robinson? I've forgotten his name. The old guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
he's full of so many racist things.
All the
He's
time.
but
Yes.
we ate that guy's words daily. So now look how many people have been consuming his language, including Muslims. I know many Muslims who watch that show, and then you start when so there are people who were like, no, this guy is wrong, but when you met those people, you like, this person is a bad influence. I don't like you because
Right.
you're not saying the truth. The truth is that man because he's a Christian and we are Christians. So that begins the wall starts being built that way. So when we arrive here, we now say black Americans are lazy because they've had all the opportunity. They don't want to do what's right. They don't know what's right for them. We know
Mm.
what's better because we've been communicating with the right people, and then reality
Wow.
hits us, and then it's like, wait, what? There's
Right.
racism? I thought Martin Luther King solved this. Wait, what's happening? And then, you know,
Wow.
so like I've had three guests on the podcast. Two of them attended HBCUs. One
Mhm.
one is the first LGBTQ guest that I had, and she grew up in Lagos. Something similar when she arrived there, she only mixed with white people, and then she attended a HBCU, and it
Yeah.
was like,
Right.
whoa, what is
Yep.
all
It
this?
burst her bubble.
The,
Yep.
the other guy too from Congo attended HBCU, and it just changed his whole perspective on how he saw black people. And that's
Interesting.
one regret I have. I wish I had attended the HBCU. I probably would have gotten out of my shell a lot earlier. But I'm glad at least I still got out. And it began to make sense when I talk to people back home, and some are like, "Oh, Trump. I like Trump, but I don't like what the same leader doing the same thing Trump is doing in Nigeria or in other
Right.
African countries. I hate that person." And I'm like, "So you like the white version, but you hate the
Right.
black one?"
Right.
And they're like, "Well, no,
Here's
I don't, that's not what I said."
That's not
But
right, but it's like you don't have
Trump
to. That's what
says it.
you're
He says it
doing.
as
Right.
it is, and I'm like, "But your leader is saying it as it is too."
Yep.
He's
Yep.
doing the exact same thing.
Here's
So
the thing.
it's all these things, but we've been construct is the
It's
messaging we've been getting
colonization.
for years, even on the
Yeah.
Arab side. It's the same thing, but we don't really talk to each other. We don't really know people, but
Right.
so
Right.
this communication thing has been
Yeah.
going and going and going, and then we now start to realize that wait a minute, this is all wrong. You
Right.
know, who's been giving you the message? Where have you been consuming the message from? Why is Fox News popular in Nigeria? Why do you think Fox News cares about you? Why is Fox News popular in your places? But some of you still say, oh, I like Barack Obama, but I wish he wasn't pushing gay agenda. What do you mean by gay agenda? Did gay people just fell out of the sky within the years Obama popped out, or all languages in Nigeria have a word for gay? They knew what gay people were before the British arrived. So there's certain things that you start seeing
Yeah.
that there's a lot of fighting going on. Like on Twitter, I see some of it, but it's still not. It's only a few people that are on Twitter,
Okay.
so we don't have. It's not that. So it's still a large amount of the population who, when we talk, my mom, she's moved back to Nigeria now, but she's always been a Democrat while she was here. But she's
Mhm.
hardcore conservative,
Really?
hardcore, and now she's in Nigeria. She's telling me she's not going to take the vaccine. She's 84 years old, and I said
Wow.
why? And then she sends me a video. Who's the person on the video? It's a governor who's saying the vaccine is for white people. Only white
Yeah.
people died from COVID, so we don't need it. But the guy had COVID and he got treated.
Right.
She left that part out, but I knew already. But she's not aware
Yeah.
that I know. And I said, well, what is all this going on? But all the
That's
misinformation
yeah.
is coming in, and you see all that, and you try to talk to people, and they're like, well, Trump, if he hadn't said that shit whole comment, I wouldn't. And then I'm like, wait, so you all are defending him? That's when there was big parties in part of Nigeria after the election. I'm like, what are you having a party for there?
Right.
And they're like, well, BLM, like one of my friends who was in Germany, he was mad at me beginning of BLM before this was in 2016. He was mad at me about BLM, and then
Really
I asked him one day. I said, "You always come at me for BLM, but
interesting.
what when we're in Nigeria? What did the police do to us?
Mm.
How did we?" He was like, "Well, that's different." I said, "Are you sure?" Okay,
Interesting.
well, all right. I'll let that slide. Then NSAS
In
begins.
SARS. Yep.
When NSAS, then he's not. Oh yes, get them. And then I'm like, okay. So
Oh,
I know how
wow.
many of you used to actually write to me in private that
Right.
the stuff I posted on my Facebook about Black Lives Matter, you all said, bro, this is too much. Nigerians should not get involved. We don't need to. This is not our business. It's for only black people. It's only black
Right.
Americans. This is not our business. Then NSAS happens. Then you all start shouting, and I'm like, how's that different?
Wow.
The same
Wow.
Nigerian police gets trained by the British.
Yeah.
When Nigeria got independence, the British were in charge of our police. The British started our police. Nobody
Yeah.
asked, what kind of training did you give them? They're still following
Yeah.
that same timetable to this day. So why wouldn't they kill you? And nobody
So
asked that. So
That's
it's always
you
been the
of, I mean,
language.
you're talking, you are spitting fire right now because it's true. I mean, no, I'm serious because here's the issue, right? So the justification for slavery
Hmm.
was based in Christianity, right? And also, so was the justification that Black people were somehow less than and should be servants and serve the masters who were white folks.
Yes.
Based in old Christianity, I should say, and that's the same Christianity that worked on colonization, right?
Yes.
That fed colonization. And so, you see this. It's unfortunate. Our people are we've been so traumatized and brainwashed
Hmm.
and hoodwinked for so long that these systems still have us hating ourselves.
Oh yeah,
And
that was always the goal. It was never to question the people who brought the message. It was for the receivers to fight with themselves.
right. It is crazy. And even here where you have even separation, right, between dark skinned and light skinned folks and
Yep.
who closer to white and how that's closer to pretty and all those stereotypes. I mean, I feel like as a people, we have the most work to do.
Hmm.
I know there are tons of folks out there who believe they are the chosen ones. I believe we are the chosen people as Black people across the diaspora, so much so that we have so much work to do to acknowledge our power that we have and our powerful history that we have, and to own it, right? Because
Yeah.
I think our history has been subverted by colonization. I think our history has been subverted by people trying to take advantage of the very beauty they knocked us down for.
Hmm.
I think our history is a powerful history, but we are the ones who have to figure it out, that we have the power, and that we are beautiful as a diaspora of people, from the lightest one to the darkest one,
Oh
right?
yes.
One on the homeland to the one here in the US.
Oh yes.
I think that we have to acknowledge, we have to begin to bring that, and hone those messages, and to teach our children the same, right? That they should be, proud of who they are. And that's why, as we gear up for celebrating, MLK Day, in the US on and then also getting ready to gear up for the shortest month of the year, which is Black History Month.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
This will be the first episode of Black History Month, by the way.
yeah. So this will be, it is a constant reminder that our history is not just defined by a month.
Yeah.
Our history is not defined by the shortest month in the year,
Hmm.
but our history is defined and interwoven in this country. And in fact, we are the backbone that has defined this country. Our ancestors built the White House,
Oh
right? And
yes.
so there's power in that. We've literally built the bedrock of this democracy, and this country was built on our backs. And so I think we as a people have to acknowledge our own power and begin to yield that power in a way that really illuminates our history, our presence, and allows us to have bright futures. That's my hope for all of us.
Me too. I like that, and I agree with it. So I know you're running out of time, so
Yeah.
I don't want to hold you too long. So just two quick questions to wrap it up. I can't leave you. I can't let you go without finding out from your travels. Um, has your favorite cuisine been affected by your travels, or do you still stick to your local cuisine? Where's your favorite cuisine come from?
My cuisine is food. Period.
You like me.
Food. I love to eat. So I love food. The one thing I can't eat is anything ugly or cute. So ugly meaning like,
Okay.
a
Yeah.
conch. I conch. I can't do conch. Right.
Yeah.
I can't do that because it's an ugly animal, I think. And I can't do anything cute. I can't eat Bambi. Sorry, I don't eat rabbit. I don't eat deer. I can't do any of that
Well,
stuff. But any
but like rabbits, you don't have if it's stewed
hell
and all
no.
that. You
Rabbit.
you can you're not looking at the cute rabbit when it's being killed and peeled and all that.
No, I can't eat rabbit because it's too cute.
Well, I've eaten rabbit though, but I like rabbits
You
at
like
the same time.
rabbit?
Yeah, I love rabbits, but
No, Yeah, dude, I can't do it because
I,
I
I I
can't.
can't I can't do the like as a kid, they'll make you kill the chicken back home, prepare it yourself,
I
peel
don't want to
it.
kill nothing. I just want like
Yeah.
fried chicken is great to me. I'll eat it fried. That's great. I'll eat it baked, fried, but I can't do so for me, cuisine, food, anything that's not cute or ugly, I will eat. It's
All
all
right.
good.
Then music.
Yes. I have an eclectic taste of music. So it's everything from Mozart to, some of the new from Cardi B and
Yeah,
Beyonce.
I love Cardi
So
B.
I'm all over the place. It really depends on my mood. Like when I write, so I'm a published author. I've co-written 3 books, and,
Oh, I
and one
forgot
of
to
them is an
mention that too.
international.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of them is an international bestseller. So when I was co-writing my piece, I like classical music because it helps me write and be creative. When I am, doing my social justice work, then I will listen to some Cardi B and some Beyonce. I'll even listen to some John Legend. When I am trying to do my workout, I'll listen to some old school DMX.
Oh,
And
well, yeah, that's the old school DMX. Either it makes you want, is either, yeah, that's workout music because that's the kind of music you listen to if you want to go fight somebody or
right, right. It's like, "Grr, grr."
oh, DMX. Oh man, I saw a clip on Instagram. Somebody sent me the clip where DMX was complaining. He was in prison and he had the pink jumpsuit on, and that was his complaint was he couldn't he had to change his life because he's wearing pink. This is too much. I can't do this anymore
That
because
was the realization.
that's the realization of, yeah, this is it. My life, I can't do this anymore. Wearing pink, really? No,
Oh
no, no.
my God.
Everybody was commenting like, so you didn't realize that your life needed
Right.
to change when you went to prison for like the thousandth time. It was when they gave you pink uniform that you're like,
Exactly.
no, 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 no. This is it. I'll draw the line here. I draw the line.
Whatever makes him realize it. That's crazy.
Oh, yeah, man, gotta love him. He was huge in
He
Nigeria
was
too.
huge.
He was
That was my
huge.
boy.
Oh, oh man. So I could do an episode with you for like 3 hours, honestly.
I
But I know that
know.
there's a whole lot I didn't get to cover. But I'll
But you
just,
gotta have me back. We'll
oh
figure out
yeah,
another time you
we
can have me back.
we have to, most definitely we will. So,
Awesome.
final question: what would
Yes.
you like to leave the audience with? Could be a quote from your book, could be a quote from a book you've read, could be a quote from one of your favorite people you've worked with, or just something that inspires you.
One thing that I always say to folks, and I mentioned it here in our talk, is there is power in being uncomfortable, especially right now in this country. I think we have a lot of people who feel that there's significant division in who we are as a nation, and whether or not we have truly lived up to our ideals. There are communities that are hurting severely because of COVID-19 and the disparate impact of communities of color. And also, injustices in the criminal justice system that people have been fighting. And so, including myself. And
Mhm.
so, I think what I always tell people is be uncomfortable. And when I say uncomfortable, I mean the only way I think that we as a country can begin to, I don't want to say mend, but can begin to acknowledge that we have still some challenges that we have to give voice to for some folks is if we become and show up authentically in ourselves. And so one of the things that I've been able to do, I did these chat and choose across the country. I began to do these after 2016. And this was as a result of the election, where I began to have and bring together different women from across the country and across the world to sit down and have hard conversations about not what defines us and what is differentiates us,
Mm.
but the things that bring us together. And so these are Republican independent, these are Black Lives Matter advocates, and these are, one woman was a self-defined white nationalist.
A lot.
So at the end of this conversation, what we realized was when we showed up in who we were, a lot of those stereotypes, like you were talking about, were dismissed and dispelled. I don't want to say dismissed, were dispelled, right? So the white woman who was a self-defined white nationalist assumed that Black people were all violent and uneducated. But she was also sitting across from a woman who was a Black Lives Matter advocate and had graduated from Howard Law. And so her mere presence of showing up at this convening challenged her notion of who she thought Black people were. And I think that's what we have to continue to do, which is to really show up authentically and have some hard civil, I'll say that again, civil conversations about what defines us as people, while also highlighting some of those things that make us unique, right? I always say I'm a Black woman. So when people say, I don't see color, what I hear them saying to me is that they don't see me.
Exactly.
And that's and so I'll go back to what I said, be uncomfortable, do something you haven't done before, right? If you really want some progress, even in your individual lives, if you don't want to do the social justice, political stuff or politics, that's fine. I don't know how you can get away from it, but that's fine. But living a life full of comfort means that you have stopped to want to progress. And so I always tell folks to put a little fire up under them and be uncomfortable.
All righty. Sounds great. And that's fantastic advice. I knew you dropped plenty of gems. So that was never a doubt for me. So, did you still have the discussions going on?
So we're looking to ramp them back up in May.
Okay.
Smaller conversations. And so you can go to my website and check that out, which is www.Desiree Bell.com. All of the information about our toured locations will be on that site.
All right. I'll add that to the show notes. That was going to be the next thing I was going to ask about how people can get in touch with you. All right. Yeah.
At Bell.
DPBell.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
I'll add that to the show notes too. So please follow Desiree on Twitter and go on the website. I will add everything to the show notes. You find it there. And yeah, she is fantastic. There's so much more to this woman that, it's greatness.
Thank you. I
So
appreciate it.
can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. And I look forward to working with you and doing more great stuff.
Yes, thank you so much for giving voice to me, and thank you to your listeners as well. It's been a pleasure.
All righty. So to everyone listening, don't forget to come back for the next episode and keep the love coming. And thank you for the privilege of your company. Thanks for listening to White Label American. If you enjoyed the show, we'll appreciate if you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. If you have any questions, comments, or have someone who will be a good guest on the show, or you want to be on the show, send us a message at whitelabelamerican@gmail.com. And make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at White Label American. Thank you for your support.